It was in 1988, and from this time I deeply was drawn to this research, or like following Friedel, and that was a way how I bumped on Edit. Then the word art therapy appeared. I went to the biggest library in Soviet Union that calls Lenin's library. And I asked them, do you have books in art therapy? So they say, what's that? I say, but something about childhood. They say, there is a catalog, look at it. And the first book that came to me into the table was a book by Edit Krammer, and it was written Art and Art-Therapy and Child. Yes?
Art as Therapy.
Art as Therapy, the first book. And then I opened this book, and it was written to Friedel. I felt that something wrong or with book or with me or with the world. So I decided, but maybe it's another Friedel. It's not that every Friedel has to be my Friedel, Friedel Dicker Brandeis. I called to Prague to the man who was also a very good researcher of Theresian art. And he said, you know what, just now Edit Kramer came to Prague, and she was a direct pupil of Friedel. I say, is it this Edit Kramer? He says, I don't know which one you mean, but it's definitely this one. I came to New York having $3 from the collection of my son. And then I went to toilet, as normal people are doing, and then I saw black women playing cards in toilet. And I say, you know what, do you know how to call to this number without money? They say, yes, you just can make call, make 0, ask operator. And I called to Edit, and I said, Edit, I am in New York.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I should feel guilty because I evaded, and I was so enormously lucky all my life. Escaped all those horrors. I was never incarcerated in any concentration camp. I went on a boat, and the boat came to New York, and that's where I stayed, in New York.
But was it shock for you to come to the States?
Oh, no. If you're 22-year-old, you are ready for an adventure. It was not like somebody has already built up a life that was destroyed and now must start all over again, right? But if you're that young, and then my first job, which I got a week I'd been in the country, they called me up, I should go to see Miss Irwin at Little Red Schoolhouse. So I went there, and they had, that is a school, a progressive school in Greenwich Village. The artist colony, artist people at that time, was still real artists living there, not snobs. And they needed a shop teacher, as a teacher to carpentry and such things. And they had tried real carpenters, and that didn't work. They made their demands were too strict for young children. And so they had thought, and they didn't have much money either to pay another teacher. So they thought all those refugees now coming, they might find a sculptor among them, and that sculptor could work with children in a more imaginative way.
Ja, har du fått det? Men vilken tur du hade. Jag hann inte med.
And so they sent me over, and of course they wanted a man.
Okay, it's not dead.
Got a cat.
Yeah.
A lady with a cat.
Lady with a cat, and now she is making very good cat. Look.
Oh, very good cat. Maybe I should make a mouse for the cat.
Oh. So what we will do then? We have to run and to eat it.
Or a bird for the cat.
Yes.
And a cat can...
But then I will make a tree, and we will put bird up so the cat will not jump and eat.
Use this as a tree.
This is a tree?
Yeah, you could. And I was a girl, but I did have some evidence. I mean, I had a little scrapbook, and there was some carpentry things in there. Miss Irwin liked me, anyway. So she hired me they had a room in that school that wasn't used. And I could sleep in that room, and I could get my food because they made lunch for the children. And they gave me a little pocket money. I think each teacher contributed $1 or so, so I had a little money to car fare and things like that.
How was your English that time?
Not very good, but I learned it from the children. I mean, it's the best way to learn English, from children. I knew a little English, and I read all the children's books. In the school in the evening, you know, children left at 3 o'clock, and I was there all day. I had the run of the whole school to myself. It got cold over the weekends because Saturday, Sunday was no school, so they didn't heat the place, so then I was cold. But otherwise, and since it was really Greenwich Village, the people I met, there was no real culture shock, because they were artists, you know, just like kind of people I was used to. I didn't have a real culture shock. I was very fortunate that way too.
Do you remember when the war started did you feel connected or disconnected from Europe that time?
Oh, well, we were connected, of course. We hoped so much for America to get into the war, you know, naturally.
But did you think about Friedel, what happened to her? Did you think, or you were completely in the new life?
Can you hear me if I talk like this? Yeah? Okay. Well, I've been asked to speak to you here because I'm one of Friedel's disciples who knew Friedel already in Vienna in the 30s. Friedel saw some of my pre-adolescent or adolescent drawings and said, well, if she's a little bit older, I will teach her. She knew she was a great teacher. She had great doubts of herself as an artist. We know she was a great artist. And so I was allowed, even while I was still going to school, to participate in some of the courses she gave to kindergarten people. We work with small children who should know a little bit about art and children's art. And so I got involved in this thing with Friedel very early. I don't know. I mean, it was not that sort of relationship. I mean, it's a relationship where you were... I mean, she was the master. You don't argue with your master. You obey, right?
But you are not I don't feel that you are a character that can obey something that has no sense.
Well, but as an artist, she made sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to her because I felt nobody could teach me about art the way Friedel could. She was an inspired teacher. I don't have wings.
You have legs.
I have. Yeah. But very solidly planted. 1, 1, 1, 2. 1, 1, 1, 2. 1, 1, 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. In a painting, in a picture, you see all sorts of rhythms, right? I mean, if you think out of Botticelli, for instance, it's full of rhythm, right? And so it's good to learn. I mean, one of the Eaton methods is to separate the various elements in a picture. in a painting or in a work of art, whatever it is, a sculpture, a picture. There are many different elements. And if you look at the whole thing, it's integrated. So if you see this whole thing, you could just copy it. But and that might be also interesting. But you might also see kind of the various elements. What is the linear composition? What is the composition of values? How does the color relate? And do each thing separate. And after you've done that, and how is the texture, for instance? I mean, if you have a still life, say, with a basket, there's part of a texture. Goes in and out, and in and out, and in and out, and in and out, and in and out. And there is maybe an apple, so it's round in every direction, round. And there might be, a vase with some flowers in it. They go up, and there they unfold. Right? That'd be another. So you could find the various elements of a picture. And then once you found it and understood this element, and then you look at the picture as a whole, you see it in a very different way. If you move your body the right way, you will get the beautiful circle without the compass. Just go around and around and go around, and you can correct yourself a little, and it will be absolutely good circle just because you move your body. Just because you move your body. You don't need to look and be worried about it, right? It gets better. It was first a little difficult. See, you can make a circle. You say you can't draw. There you are. If you have you listened a little bit what it sounds like when we do that? It's a very nice, calming kind of a sound. Yes. Now, it would be very different if you make eternity, like 1 and 2 and 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 1 and 2, 1 and 2. See, and again, you get something quite beautiful. Yeah. I mean, the other thing is that really, if you give a rhythm, you can, with a person like this here, she told me she can't draw, she's never drawn in her life, get something that has graphic dignity and shows a mind that can understand and can follow and has a logic. And of course you can draw.
Wow.
Right?
Now we will change the paper and we will make this dictation, yeah? Okay. So we're actually now doing what children in Terezin also were doing, and Edit was doing.
She would also do things like give a dictation. She would suddenly begin to talk. There is a very smooth rolling pin, and then there's some very heavy piece of bricks, and then there is market nets. And inside that market net, you want to put some potatoes, but I guess we'll have to first like some people have them inside, and somebody's carrying it. Okay. And now this person who's carrying those potatoes has to climb up some stairs, and she is heavily loaded down with the potato, and she has trouble climbing the stairs 1 and 2, and she climbs and she climbs and she climbs and she climbs until she gets to her house, and she's then very gratified. Thank God I'm home with all those heavy potatoes. So it would be something like that. Now one can do that, of course, at great length. And then one has to see, I think everybody got the very good bricks. And then this person is carrying up, but I think that person would be really bent down if she carried something that heavy. It would pull her down, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would pull her down, but she would still have to get up and up and up. Oh my God! what you have to do in America.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
In America, you have to tell them you do need a structure, otherwise you just have a model.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have, you have a model. So you need to give some structure.
In Russia, in a totalitarian system, I tried to organize different kind of schools and treatment, and I worked with disabled children and difficult children and crazy children and autistic children and children with cancer. There was no place where after 2-3 months they threw me out because I brought something that they didn't want children to be. I brought the feeling of complete capability, freedom and joy. And children in Soviet Union of that time should be organized, Ordnung, do whatever teacher is telling them, and that was very difficult.
When I started with this business, there was no books available. I wrote one of the first that was available, right? I mean, what was available was Löwenfeld and certain things. Ernst Kries, I think, had written already some things about Messerschmitt. And there was progressive education. There was Zizek. And then as I started working, I found out more. And, you know.
But with Zizek, I don't know.
Well, I was taken to Zizek when I was a child. And he saw some of my work and he said, she belongs to a nature study. I mean, she's too advanced, too mature for me. He was good in the beginning, and then also some of the productions became very saccharine. Most people get stuck somewhere and then repeat themselves. Not everybody. I hope you don't repeat yourself yet. I hope I don't repeat myself. But many people do.
I do.
You? Because you make food all the time.
I mean, to work with disturbed kids, there is enormous stress in America too. You have stress, you have different stress. You're afraid some crazy kid will bring a gun in and go bang, 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 right, and kill you and others. You sure the kids I work with, they are unwanted before they're born. Many of them were not wanted before they're born. They're born to addicted parents and they live in the streets. You know, I mean, children live in a very dangerous world
Today, yes.
today in the big cities.
If a child is overactive and
So these days they medicate them. The
No,
trouble thing
no,
is
it's
they do
not.
medicate them instead of working with them. Now this boy was then discharged from Wiltwig School home, and after a few weeks he came back because the parents couldn't stand him. And he came back. Meanwhile I had taken, this painting, since it was the sun, I had hung it in the dining room above the clock. So he made a new sun. Next picture, please. But the sun has changed. Yellow no longer carries this happiness. Now, he stayed with us for a while and was again discharged and again came back like a wet penny. And when he again came back, I had this paint picture up, of course, I'd taken it down. He said, I'll make a new sun for the dining room. So, because that was kind of his trademark at this point, he was the one who painted suns for the dining room. So he painted another sun for the dining room, and look at it. And particularly frightening is this thing between the eyes, because that third eye, that's, he might end up in a hospital. That's the inner eye that you very often see in schizophrenic art. So the good food, and it seemed that his parents particularly couldn't stand how much he ate. He ate too much. So the first big painting that was so beautiful was when very good food was available. The best of him came out. And then everything got worse and worse and worse. Now let's have another yellow. Now this was done by a prisoner in Rikers Island. I worked for 1 year in the psychiatric ward of Rikers Island, where the prisoners go before they are sentenced. They wait there for the full sentence. So this boy, This young man painted himself in his cell with the toilet and the water and the little bit things that he was allowed to have, all in yellow. Next, please. In that same prison when I worked, there was another prisoner, and he did this picture, and he explained it's in the desert, and there's this very hot, burning sand, yellow sand, and this poor guy is crawling in the sand. He's very thirsty, and there's a man there, an Indian, that won't let him go past, and there is this cactus, and in the cactus there's water. But he said, but there are all the spikes on the cactus, he will not get the water. So this really is a painting of hopelessness, where the sun is an enemy rather than a friend. And I think very often in the desert, I mean hot countries, the sun has very different meaning than in our cold countries. With us, the sun is good, but in a desert, the sun is the enemy. So you get the yellow meaning something quite different. Okay, my sweet, so now we know everything.
Not everything, but a lot.
A lot.
A lot more than we knew before.
Yes, yes, yes.
Do you wash that in this? How do you wash it?
Well, since I'm going to use maybe this morning, you don't, if you just wash it like this now, it's enough.
It's hard to wash, huh?
Huh?
Hard to
Brushes.
wash.
Well, it's one thing one has to do if one is a painter, to wash brushes.
Right.
As a psychiatrist, I am very interested, of course, in people's life story. Then there is another line in the background of the workshop. It is Edit and art-terapie and my house.
Today, you need no longer to think where does the sun come to make either warm or to make shadow. All those things that before were natural for making a building is gone. That's why they're so ugly. In church, you go and you dip the Weihwachskessel, you bend down, you have a certain way of behaving in a church. You wouldn't eat there, you wouldn't make love there, you worship. And so the architecture kind of expresses and enforcing part or supports a way of behavior that's right for being in church. And since you couldn't build any such things anymore, you tried to make such a thing, make an apartment to have this kind of a function. This is the way you should go to bed. This is the way you should have your meal. This is the way you should put your clothes away, right? Very strict. And that's wrong for living. In living, you should have the possibility of, all right, I don't want to go to bed in this corner, I put the bed in that corner.
Yes. Ned. This one. Yeah. Yes, now it's great.
People know about Edit, psychiatry department they know, and there are art therapists here now around, and they were, oh, will she come? Oh, how could you get such a well-known person coming to Hudiksvall? They said. So it is, I said. I said, yeah, she likes to be here and paint in the light summer night.
She paints at night, yes.
She gets up when sun gets up, or a little late, because sun gets up very early here. So she likes to paint in that light.
It's like it's 3 o'clock.
And then, yeah, and then she goes back, have something to eat, and she sleeps, and then she does something else, and then in the evening when it's towards sunset, she then goes out. So usually she has one painting for the morning going and one painting for the evening. Usually, and she's very quick if weather is good. So usually she finishes a painting in 3 days.
It's true. These days, young people who want to go in art, they learn tricks, or they learn to look for tricks, and that's the worst thing you can do. And then you have fake art. I mean, your personality will evolve anyway. You can't help it. If you're honest and you work, you will develop a style of your own. But it should come, it's not something you should search for your style. It should emerge out of your continuous work. Then suddenly it has a style of its own. But you shouldn't say, I must develop a style. Then you're fake. What you do is a fake. I think what interests me is to see how much the background, the color, will determine both the subject matter and how you paint it. It'd be very different than if you start on a white sheet of paper, right? Yes. And that means that you should fill the whole page to the edge,
Yes.
so that you really can't escape the background. Color comes to you. Color is very different in that sense that even a splash of color, if you make a scribble that's totally chaotic, you don't like to look at it, it's just a scribble. But if you have a splash of color, the color speaks. In that sense, color is different from line. And you find certain people very afraid of their emotions, they prefer to draw, and other of it, again, they blossom with color. I know all my Latin, I mean, if I worked with children, any Latin child from Puerto Rico up to Spain or whatever, they blossom the one there's color. And some other, more for middle class, white, they prefer line, they prefer to draw. I think there's also a cultural thing in that very much. I mean, sometimes you might bring a picture to the rounds, but usually they just see the disturbance, and the disturbance is all over the person. What you might see in art is a strength, a hidden strength that might not show anywhere else. And then you try to persuade other people there is some strength. If you find strength in some artwork of a person who is disturbed. In one sentence? Art therapy, well, it's using art materials with people who have troubles. Interpretation is not important, is to make it. And if I do anything about the picture, I stay within the picture. I don't go out and say, oh, you're afraid, or, oh, this and that shows the picture. If I do anything, any at all talk, I think the more important than talk is the making of the thing. And the picture talks back to the person who made it. And that's the most important dialogue that occurs. There can be also some talking. It very often happens when we wash up the brushes or put things away. We start talking and maybe talking about the picture too. But if it's the picture, I would say, oh, is that witch going to fly some far? She's going to fall. I wouldn't say, you're afraid of a witch. So I feel that what one has to develop besides a good eye, so to speak, a third eye to see the real messages, we also have to develop a third hand with which you can support a person's creative attempts without intruding, without putting yourself into it, just giving this little bit of support. In art, you tell the truth.
Yeah.
In art comes the truth, but it comes in a way that that it touches you immediately, not intellectually. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't need, you can diagnose troubles. In innumerable way. Any slice you take of a human being is the same. Just wherever you take the blood, it's the same blood.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
you know, but if you look at the picture, you get the others, you get more the humanity, you get the strength. You very often find the strength rather than pathology. Pathology is easy to find. But how to overcome pathology or what strength there is, that art therapy can much more both show and sustain and support the strength.
Что делать будем сегодня?
Репетировать.
I'm terribly sloppy, as you know.
No, we're both sloppy.
I mean, I have one set of clothes for good. I probably would put it on for the vernissage here.
No, we met the last time you were here.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and even earlier. Yes. This is a friend of mine here in this wonderful exhibition.
You like it?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Do you know those magic trees?
Ska inte tro det blir sommar ifall inte någon
So far I can read without glasses.
sommaren och gör lite somrigt för då kommer blommorna snart. Jag gör så att blommorna blommar. Jag gör hela kohagen grön. Och nu så har sommaren kommit. För jag har ju slagit på snön. Jag gör mycket vatten i bäcken. Så där så det hoppar och far. Jag gör fullt med svalor som flyger. Och myggor som svalorna tar. Jag gör även ner på träden. Och små fågelbor här och där. Jag
Remember, I wanted also to ask you about what do you think about art and future of art?
Future of art. Well, I think that, I mean, the arts, the establishment art today is, of course, a closed circle of galleries, critics, and artists, and they're totally divorced from real life and from the public. Those longing for art which remains, which always is there, is not fulfilled by that, what those artists do. And then everybody says, I don't understand art, right? I mean, because if that's art, then I wouldn't understand it either. I mean, let's put it like this way, you might not understand a Picasso and still see that Picasso is a great artist, though a flawed genius, but a genius. But what came after those first art, art for art's sake. I mean, Picasso, Matisse, Paul Klee, Kokoschka, right? There was a real power in the art, which you might have to learn, acquire the taste for, but it would save you, I mean, it would be worth your while to acquire the taste to understand those artists. And many people did acquire the taste for it. So they were not totally divorced from the man on the street. Picasso maybe most. But I think what came afterwards, what there is now, is really a closed circle that makes nonsense, just tricks. And that the love for art, the desire for art, is not fulfilled by those artists. But I think there is beginning of a new movement, of an art that is more in touch with the real world and real people, is more a gift to the world rather than a trick played on the world.
Mm-hmm. And where is your place?
Oh, of course, I'm one who, I hope, I give a gift to the world. I certainly don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not a misunderstood artist. I might be financially or part of fame not well-known artist, but I think my art does address this here world. And people are very happy about it, even if they don't have the money or wouldn't have the idea of really buying it. I mean, you know, an American might spend a lot of money to buy a new car. He wouldn't spend that kind of money to buy a painting.
God. Oh, my memory. I don't have a memory.
Right here.
Well, it was very wonderful, and I felt I want to draw there in that museum. Spend a week drawing in the museum. And so when I do that, Ingrid says, if I stay at your place, I can take a train.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We go straight to Copenhagen. Yes. Oh, yes.
That would be great. That's what maybe next year I could do it in the spring.
Yeah.
Because really I want to draw there. There are things there you don't find anywhere else.
Yeah.
Nowhere else. How they brought and why they stole all that stuff and brought it from Rome there to Denmark, I don't know, but he did bring. Where they acquired this material, I wonder, and how they acquired it. Particularly the portraits of the Roman women in the empire, you know, the late Roman Empire. They are so interesting and such strong characters. I think those women, and they were not beautified like, I mean, the men, they would be idealized in the sculptures, but the women are not idealized. And you see some interesting faces, just wonderful faces, and many of them faces you still find now if you go to Italy. The same faces, the same gestures. That'd be interesting. Then the sarcophagi that are part already Christian and some are still Romanesque, and the mixture of the is still very much in the old, Roman Greek kind of sculpture, rounded and all that, but already some Christian motifs in those big sarcophags. They're very interesting. It's a very distinct transition to the Christianity. You see it in the art. And I thought I wanted to draw some and study that more than I could just going through the museum briefly. It's all on the ground floor, that part.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What I know is that people desire art and appreciate it even if they don't want to pay for it. If it's art that addresses their own life. And I have that myself, have had the experience. I mean, like, I remember I made many sketches for my subway paintings. Yes. And I was sitting there making this painting, watercolors in studies. And a woman came by to me and said, you know, I must thank you. Because since I've observed you painting the subway, and since I've seen that, I see the subway in a different way. So that's what you want, right? And you can get that.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's it.
Yeah.
The interview is concluded.
Yes.
Good.
Han smeker sin blomma och ser henne som ser mina blommor